Okay, we left off Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan had said a principle that regarding, although you were of the opinion, Eino Demakna Dav Shelo B'Olam, you cannot affect something which doesn't exist yet. Everybody agrees to this principle, especially if it's something which is not meant to happen. Not meant to happen, but if a person has control now to make something happen, although it doesn't exist yet, it gives it value. He gave the example. A person wants to tithe truma and affect something that's attached now, growing, which ultimately will be detached. And it's grown sufficiently that if he would detach it, it would be a valid tithing. So the question is, the act of tithing, does it have any value now to take effect when the item that's been detached will have value? So he says, since the person could actually detach it now, what's growing, therefore, it doesn't have the issue of Dav Shelo B'Olam. We don't look at it as if it doesn't exist. However, the Gemara had said, first, I will marry you after you convert. He says to a woman, after I convert. Or let's say a person says, I will marry after your master emancipates you. Right now, she's not marriageable. Right? You can't. So the act of kiddushin now, it's like you're marrying. I will marry your child when you conceive in 6 years from now. It's nothing. It's meaningless. Because the act, you want to give the action value, but it's contingent to have value on something that doesn't exist. Your action has no value whatsoever. Even though that child will be conceived and born 6 years from now, it's meaningless. So anything you have no control over now, to bring it about, what you do now has no value even for the future. Svara. Svara. No, Svara. Logic. It is logical. It is logical. Because the Gemara is going to... So the Gemara asks you a kasha. That's the Gemara. Because it's the contingent on the Bezdin. And even if you have the Bezdin set in place, the Bezdin still have to be agreeable, and if they could choose not to accommodate you. You're not in control. We'll talk about it. If you notice, the last case is in parentheses. Okay, we'll see. At this minute. At this moment. No, but every Bezdin is the same idea. You don't have control. You don't have control over the Bezdin. Because it's their prerogative or their decision whether they want to accommodate you or not accommodate you. What about a master's about to emancipate his slave? The woman, his slave. I'm marrying you after you will be emancipated. She's going to be emancipated in 2 minutes. And factually, does emancipate her. Doesn't make a difference. But at that moment, you have no control over it. Because the master could have changed his mind. He didn't have to. It's dependent on him giving her the shtar shichrur, to get shichrur, or not. The document of emancipation.
No, but if the master tells his slave woman, after you were emancipated, I'll marry you. So it's within his power to do it.
Good question. The Gemara will ask that question too. He says, good question. Rabbi came, this is the third time that he's asking better questions. It says, the Gemara says, a man, based on Rabbi Yochanan, let's say the master would say to his slave woman, after I emancipate you, I will marry you. It should be good, according to Rabbi Yochanan, because it's within his power to emancipate her, right? But the fact is, but she has to be agreeable to marry him. He has no control on that. Right? So that's what the Gemara will say. But she could always change her mind. It's no different than the Bezdin. It's no different than the Bezdin. We agreed to be involved in your conversion. It doesn't make a difference. She doesn't have to. Let's say the last moment she says, I disagree. She could always disagree. Even I agree, she could disagree. Right now, the action has no value. It only has value because you have control. But you have no control. Because she could disagree. We had a discussion before if a man gives a woman money for kiddushin. And she accepts it. And she accepts marriage from a third party before it takes effect. Is the second marriage a marriage? The Mishnah says the second marriage is a marriage. Right? In 30 days from now. Before, she takes money, he gives her money, she accepts it for marriage in 30 days. To be effective in 30 days. Right? And she accepts marriage from a third party. Who's she married to? The second person or the first person?
She's married to the second person.
No, she needs nothing from this. The first person is meaningless. It's explicit Mishnah. You know, let's replay the tape. It's called review. You review, you'll see. It's explicit in the Mishnah. Okay? No, you could. It depends. Let's say he says, I'm giving to you as a gift. Okay, you're right. We'll see. Let's say a person, after I convert, I want to marry you. The Mishnah says that Gemara says, Nami la biyodo. That's not under his control. Dom Reb Chi Barabam Reb Yochanan. Ger tzorach shlosha. A ger for the conversion process needs three judges, 3 Jews. My timer. Why? Mishpat ksivvei. Because the Torah uses the mishpat, it's the equivalent of a bezdin, judgment. Kedin, right? Ksivvei. Kedei miyemed is mizkul lehani tlosa. Who said the 3 will be agreeable to accommodate him? That they will offer their services. So this is interesting, Tosfos. It seems from here for conversion you need three dayanim. So Tosfos cites a number of locations. We see it's not the case. Let's see Tosfos. Maybe we'll go first through the cases. Maskil of Rav Abba Bar Momol. So Rav Abba Momol asks on Rabbi Yochanan's principle that as long as it's within your power to bring about something, it's not considered dov shlobol olam. Elamiata no se pruta l'shivchoso. This is Rabbi's question. A person gives a cent which is sufficient for kiddushin to a slave woman. Vomar harei mukdeshes li la'acha she'esh tarech. You should be married to me after I emancipate you. Right? So you could emancipate at this moment. Hochanami davi kiddushin. It should be kiddushin. Now, the Gemara answers something differently at this point, but Tosfos says the Gemara could have answered. We'll see in a moment. It should be a kiddushin because he's in control, correct? The master's control. Gemara says, Hochi hashto, hosami kora behima hashto dasacheres. You hear this? What it's saying? What is the difference? He says, right now it's the equivalent of an animal, and after emancipated, it's a person of what? Of intellect. It's a human being. It's the transition is animal to human being. That's a slave to a non-slave status. Right? A slave is what is considered a chamor, equivalent of a chamor, within halachic terms. So therefore it's different. See, when you have grain growing on the field, it's grain. We need exer sakosuf to say that despite its grain, if it's not detached, you can't tithe it. But it's grain. This doesn't exist. Let's say everybody would agree, right? Something is whatever. You can make a call, they're going to send it out. But they have to manufacture it. Right? You have to manufacture it first. It doesn't exist. Not a slave woman to a Jew. It's a different reality. Therefore, even though you could bring that about, it's irrelevant. I'll give you an example. And this is something we discussed. Okay? Say it 100%? But no, it's within your ability to bring about a conversion of converting the chamor to a human being. But that's exactly what the Gemara said. But until you bring about that change, it doesn't exist. Here it does exist. There's a problem. So because I could do something that could overcome that problem, it's not a problem. And that's the concept of biyodo. It's within my ability to detach it. But it's interesting. We're differentiating between a Gentile and a slave. A slave is a chattel. A Gentile is an independent person. Except the Torah says you're not permitted to marry. Marriage has no relevance to that person. But as a person is a person. A non-Jew is not classified as an object. A slave is a chattel. Correct. Yeah, okay, but they're not Gentiles. Even though they're Gentiles, that's as a nation. That's relating to their spirituality. The word, we always mention the Maral, in terms of the word chamor comes from chomer. As in terms of their dimension, their capacity of spirituality, they're no different than the donkey. They're all physicality. Other nations have a certain degree of spirituality. They have the least of all the nations. No, that's that differentiation. With the differentiation between a slave, a Canaanite slave, and a Gentile. A Gentile is something else. Correct. That's what we say. See, a Gentile has a mind of his own, and he has independence, and he has rights. A slave is an object which has intellect. That's it. Let's say you'd have a chimpanzee, and you would consider his intelligence considered not instinctive, but it's called intelligence. So the monkey has less intelligence. Okay. So here you have a chattel which has intelligence. It's not a human being. You don't classify it as a human being. It's an animal. No, but within the context of halacha, like I said, grain is grain on the field. Except the Torah says you can't tie something which is growing, which is attached to the ground. The Torah has told me you can't marry a Gentile. A Gentile is not marriageable. But among themselves, they do have marriage. I mean, what about a slave to a slave? A slave to a slave it's also not marriage. If, let's say, a master designates a slave for his slave, and then afterwards somebody has relations with that woman, it's not adultery under any circumstance. Why? Because a slave, a chattel, has no relevance to the whole concept of exclusivity of marriage. Doesn't. It's an object. That's all it is. A Gentile, if a man and woman, they decide to live as man and wife, and another man cohabits with her, that's adultery. So you see, she has relevance to a relationship which is called marriage. Except the Torah says a Gentile, for a Jew, you cannot marry that woman. But she's a woman who has relevance to marriage. The slave has no relevance. We say ein lo chayus. It's like a chamor. Same thing. No, Tosas himself is going to say that in a moment, that the Gemara could have said that. No. The Gemara is saying the more simple answer here. Simple. Here the object doesn't exist. But even if it did, because she still has control, because she still has to be agreeable to marry, the Gemara could have said it. The Gemara is saying the more simple answer. That's exactly what I'm saying. So what about? But that same terminology is used by a non-Jew. That's what I'm saying. It's a different concept of new creation. Let me give you an example. Correct. Yeah. It's something that's relationship. It's not a new creation. Gershus Gakot Shenola Domi is only within relationships, not in terms of the status of a human being. See, in that context, when we say that, why could a father marry a daughter? Because in terms of relationships, there's no relationship between them. We see that as a new human being. Before you were a human being that was related, now you're no longer related. But you were always classified as a human being. Here, you're going from chattel to human being. It's a different reality. It's like a different species. Before the species is called human. You're a human being. Right? The laws of marriage have relevance to you. All the laws have relevance to him. The laws of marriage have no relevance to this person. He's a chattel, like I said, which has intellect.
So the master.
It's interesting. The Gemara says, if you want to take it, there's a halacha that you're not supposed to. The Torah says, "Lo yirabucha ervas dover." Person, if his genitals are uncovered, you say the Shema you're not Yotzei Shema, right? Because it says Lo Yirbucha Ervos Dover. Anything which is ervo, if it's exposed, it's not covered. One is not Yotzei. You're not permitted to study Torah. You're not permitted to say a bracha. You're not permitted to say Shema. Anything. So the Gemara says, what about if you'd have an animal? And you see the animal. You see it's procreate, its organs, right? Are you permitted to say the Shema? The answer is definitely permitted. But it's its genital. That's an animal, right? So the Gemara says, what about a goy? The Gemara brachos we had. What about a Gentile? Is that considered an ervo in regard to these laws here? Maybe it's like a behemoth. I'm just telling what the Gemara says as a consideration. So the Gemara says no, because it's a human being. It's no different than a Jew. But that's the answer. But still, but it was a consideration, and there we're not talking about. There would make a difference. Slave, it's a human species. But here, even within the context of halacha, a Gentile has relevance to marriage. Among the other, a slave has no relevance to marriage whatsoever.
But what about
So now, as a result of the emancipation, even within the halacha context, it's taking on a whole different dimension of person. Therefore, that's a davar shelo b'olam. Even though you have within your ability to bring about the transition. Same thing, because the erv is dependent on the species. It's a human species. I mean, a person kills a slave, a person is put to death. It's murder, right? Still a human being. We're talking about within the context of marriage. These aspects of the question. Now, say something. One second. We had something we studied certain laws. There's a halacha that's regarding the laws of nida. Laws of nida, that there's certain situations that if you find blood on something which is susceptible for tumah, it's considered a mareh. Okay? We had we had a little bit of chulin that, let's say a woman is sitting on the ground and she stands up and she finds the ground is stained with blood, but she didn't feel any contraction of the uterus. Is she a nida even on a rabbinic level? So Mor says she's not a nida on a rabbinic level, not even on a rabbinic level. Why? Because on a Torah level, the only time a woman becomes a nida, she has to feel the contraction of the uterus or something within her body flowing. She doesn't feel either that. On a Torah level, she's not a nida. Rabbinically, if it's more than a certain amount of blood, rabbinically we classify her as a nida. But when did they say that? It's only if the blood is found on davar makabel tumah. So since the ground is not makabel tumah, the blood was on the ground. So therefore, she's not a nida. So the Chassam Sof has a discussion. Okay, this question. At one time, paper was made of rags. It was made of rags. So if you take rags and you process into paper, so the question is, do you see it as the cloth? If it's a cloth, there's no question. The cloth, it's a certain size, it's subject to tumah. But something which is not makabel tumah, so you said paper. Paper is not cloth. But you say, well, it was manufactured from cloth. So Chassam Sofer says a chiddush. We say panim chadosh is bo l'kam. That since today it has no semblance of the cloth, we see it as a different entity. As if it's totally unrelated to what the material that was needed to bring it about, and therefore it's not makabel tumah. So therefore, it's a whole question. So if a woman goes and she cleanses herself and she finds a stain on the toilet paper, right? Today it's not made of rags. Is it toilet paper? It's makabel tumah, right? Definitely it's not makabel tumah. But it doesn't make a difference because since it's being held by a person in the hand, and the person is makabel tumah, we see the blood as if it's on the body of the person. But let's say you find it on paper. A woman sitting, give you an example. A woman sitting, and let's say there's a paper covering on wherever it may be, on the ground. Person sits down on the ground, you put a newspaper. and the woman gets up, and she sees a stain there. It's irrelevant. Newspaper has no value whatsoever. She's not Anita, regardless, over there. Okay?
Rabbi, going back to...
this concept here. With respect to the Canaanite slave, so the Gemara introduces a concept that says that she's like an animal. And then when we considered a convert, we have to say there's a distinction. A convert is also not an animal.
It was never a consideration.
It was never a consideration. It would have been easier for me if the Gemara had said that the reason that it doesn't work with the Canaanite slave is because she has no independent will to accept the kiddushin at the front end. That's the concept of the slave.
Right.
Okay, there's no independent will. Forget about her classification as an animal. There's no independent will.
That's what I said.
He only has will when the conversion takes place.
I mean, Tosas touches upon that. Tosas says the Gemara could have said that, what you're saying. But, that's what I'm saying. The Gemara is just saying something which is simple. Here, it doesn't even exist. The person doesn't exist.
It's much more difficult.
Okay, it depends where you're coming from. Look, I would think as a South African, you wouldn't have difficulty with this.
No, because we
You
said
know,
Gentile
if you're a
is human
Mandela
being.
guy or you're some other guy, okay?
No, we said a Gentile is not an animal. A Gentile is a human being.
Because I'm saying it's a chattel. Nobody disagrees. A slave is a chattel.
Yeah, but I would go from there to this concept.
Could you imagine you inherit slaves? Torah says, when a person dies, his slave is passed down as part of the estate, like any other, like the animals passed down. That's an insult, to anybody, to humanity.
I would say, and that shows that the slave has no independent will. He's lacking in that freedom to accept the kiddushin.
Okay.
Rabbi, there are two conditions for...
Okay.
The master wants to marry a slave. First, he has to emancipate her.
So that's within his power.
And second, she has to be converted.
No, we'll discuss that in Tosas.
But she has to be converted.
You don't need a bezdin. You don't need a bezdin for that.
Because she may very well accept...
It's interesting. Tosas says something interesting. Tosas says something interesting, which to me was a chiddush. That a slave, to become a Jew, a Gentile, has to have what we call Kabbalas mitzvos. He has to accept upon themselves to observe mitzvos. So the bezdin presents the prerequisites to become a Jew. Are you agreeable to this? And they make an evaluation if the person is sincere or not. And then they agree that the person is worthy of conversion. Right? What about a Canaanite slave? A Canaanite slave is obligated in all the mitzvahs of a woman, whether it's a man or a woman. So, and when you emancipate it, there's no Kabbalas mitzvahs. The person becomes a Jew. So Tosas said, where's the Kabbalas mitzvahs? So Tosas says, because when originally you made him into the slave, right? It's a semi-conversion process. At that time, there was Kabbalas mitzvahs.
So from that point of view, the slave
No.
has the highest standing of a gentile.
In a degree, but in regard to marriage, the person is not marriageable. Has no relevance to marriage, because I said even among slaves, a Gentile wants to marry, or let's say the master gives a male to the female slave. There's no relationship. It's purely a physical relationship. There are no halachic ramifications of that relationship. Correct. Can. No, because it's no different. Because it's already the classification. If a convert has a child, the convert's a Jew, the child's a Jew. The slave is a slave with this degree of obligation, so the child assumes the same. So you don't need. Doesn't make a difference, yeah. She frees her. Correct, without accepting mitzvahs.
When her father sold himself, he accepted all of the ramifications that come with being
It's a Canaanite slave, not a
right,
Jewish slave.
right? But no, we were just saying that in the beginning,
But again, who?
the Canaanite slave.
Yeah, but who's the woman? But who's the mother? The mother, the same thing. When she became a Canaanite slave, she had to accept those mitzvahs. But how did she become originally? What's the lineage?
The lineage is back to the original person.
The original accepted the mitzvos.
Right.
Yeah, so good. So that person accepted the mitzvos. So it's like being born from a person who accepted mitzvos of a slave. Same idea.
I think the slave had 12 months to basically behave themselves and accept, right?
Agreeable.
Rabbi, and
You couldn't have a slave.
if not, you had to sell that slave.
Correct.
So after that 12
What time is
months,
it? The minutes are correct. An hour. Okay. Okay. I just want to go a little further.
Can I ask a question, Rabbi?
Go ahead.
At what point can a regular simple slave become a Canaanite slave?
Well, what's a simple slave? What is a slave?
Slave as the lowest of the lowest.
No, a slave. Are we talking about a blue-collar worker or less than that? So the person is independent. The person is agreeable to do a certain chore. The person is not a slave. Slave means you own the person.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking during biblical time. Is a slave. What's
Slave
the
was a
difference?
slave. Slave meant Canaanite. That's what a slave meant.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Elohad de Amar Reboshia. Listen to this. Hanosein pruta lishto. Man's married to a woman, and he gives her a cent. He says, here? For financial reasons, his accountant told him, if her income and your income, you got a problem. So he has to divorce her, but he doesn't want to take a chance that, he'll lose her. So he says, I'm marrying you, that the marriage take effect after I divorce you. Right? She's Enim Kudeshes. Rabbi Yochanan, have they kiddushin? Right? Rabbi Yochanan, have they kiddushin? Should be kiddushin. Correct? Because he has control. If you say to another woman, after your husband divorces you, I want to marry you, so it's understood. Because you have no control of terminating that marriage. But over here, the husband himself says, after I divorce you, I want to marry you. So he is controlling in terminating the marriage. Right?
She can say no.
So the Gemara says, biyadu l'garsha, biyadu l'kacha, biyadu l'kacha. He may have the ability to terminate the marriage, but once she's free, it depends if she's agreeable. So today, it's not within her power. Correct? It's not within her power. It's only after she's divorced. And after she's divorced, she may say no. Therefore, at the moment of doing the act cannot be classified as an act of kiddushin because from both sides, it has to have relevance to kiddushin, which it doesn't. That's what the Gemara is answering. Because she's agreeable. She's agreeable. So the Gemara says, see, because when the Mishnah states the case, this component, this issue is not an issue. Correct? The case of Mishnah is you go to a third party's wife and say, I want to marry you after your husband divorces you. So there, it's only the issues. You don't have to come on to the second side of it. It's the first side. You have no control. So we're asking now, but here you do have control. The Gemara says you still don't have full control. Of course, there's a second party that has to agree, which is the woman. So Gemara says now, interesting concept now. Tivshid boy raboshia. Hanosi shtei prutos liisha. Here, a person gives 2 cents. A woman is single, and he gives her 2 pennies, and he says to her, "Liisha ba'achas omar hiskachi li hayom." He says, "The first penny, I want you to marry me today." Uba'achas omar lo hiskachi la'achas shagarshich. Interesting. Yeah. He gives a single woman. He says, "Take 2 pennies, 2 cents. With one, I want you to be my wife today, and with the second one, I want you should be my wife after I divorce you." Avram, you with me? Yeah. Okay. So Raboshi has a question: Is she Kudeshes? Is the second kiddushin a kiddushin? Tishmiyod lavi kiddushin. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that he says the criteria to be a marriage, he has to be in control. We just said after I divorce you, I'll remarry since it's dependent upon her. Right? It's not. That's Davashal B'Olam. B'Olamos here also. The second penny should have no value because after he marries her, now again it's up to her whether she wants to be agreeable to marry him. So what's Rabbi Oshi's question? So from Rabbi Yochanan we should be able to resolve that it's Enim Kodeshes.
Isn't that exactly like the first case about
married, after the first one, after she accepts the first one, that becomes the first marriage.
Exactly. So what's the question?
Right.
That's exactly the question. That's not simultaneous here. He says consecutive. After I marry you, I'm marrying you with the first, and the second one should take effect when I divorce you. Good? But Rabbi Oshi has a question. So the Gemara says, let's resolve Rabbi Oshi's question. It's Einu Kodeshes. Right? That it's not. Except what's the difference? The Gemara says, Hashtra Tafshi no. Dilma Kecha Tafshi Kiddushin Hashtra Tafshi Nami Lacher. Lacher Kain. You know what the difference is? When you're married to a woman, at this moment, she's not marriageable. Right? Because she's married to you. Correct? The moment you divorce her, now it's up to her whether she agrees to marry you or not. Okay? That's Davar Shabbat. Okay? Here, right now, she's a single woman. Right? She hasn't married with either. Right? He's giving her 2 pennies. At this moment, if he would say, I want to marry you at a later date, if she has the capacity, and she's agreeable to that. Now she's agreeable. Correct? She's telling you now, right now, she is available for that later date. Because she hasn't yet been married with the first penny.
The first penny is making her married.
But that's the question. That's Rabbi Oshi's question. Does it make a difference? Since at the time when he's giving the first, he's giving the second, and she's agreeable, the question is, do we say, because factually the first takes effect first? It's not a tonight. It's not a tonight. It's not a tonight.
I'm marrying you with this and with this.
To be continued.